You might not know this, but one day the WWE tried to create a new Rey Mysterio. This wrestler was called Sin Cara, and the Federation had a lot of ambition with him. But it will be a colossal failure in the end, which still remains hard to understand to this day. It's a delight to meet you on the Wrestling Paradise to tell you the craziest stories about Sin Cara in the American company. Are you ready to be shocked to learn how a friend of Sin Cara has already pointed a gun at Alberto Del Rio? Do you want to understand how this character could continue to exist for several years, despite his dismissal? Do you want to find out why the Mexican was suspended at the worst possible moment of his career? And are you curious to learn which match he was supposed to have at WrestleMania 28 and the record that the Federation wanted to break with it? You have come to the right place, because in our video we will see stories together that you might not know about this luchador, and they may surprise you. You are on the Wrestling Paradise, the most insane stories about Sin Cara in the WWE. Here we go. Let's start with the end, which is crazy. The one who was the most exciting new name in the WWE in 2011 will have become random in the summer of 2013, which will mark the end of his adventure for viewers. His last match will be against his compatriot Alberto Del Rio. On that day, he had quickly taken a kick from his opponent in the fingers, which injured him. After a jump outside the ring, he had his finger twisted and asked the referee to stop the match. Alberto will allow himself to continue to assault him despite the end of the confrontation, visibly annoyed by Sin Cara's attitude. Although we imagine that his finger injury was painful, it did not represent much compared to the suffering of a Mick Foley in the famous Hell in a Cell from 1998, for example. Even if he was on the verge of death, he didn't ask to stop the match and had gone all the way. In addition, Alberto Del Rio didn't like his colleague backstage. Several years before, when they were both wrestling in Mexico, Sin Cara apparently got a big head with his success, allowing himself to arrive late for his matches, spending his time partying and drinking. On the day when they were supposed to have a match against each other, the masked wrestler arrived 3 hours late. Alberto was very upset and wanted to go talk to him. What he said did not please a friend of Sin Cara, who pulled out a gun. Fortunately, they will calm down and, according to Alberto, his colleague apologized to him afterwards. After this match, in which he had therefore really hit him, Alberto asked him where his heart and his passion had gone. Sin Cara replied that he no longer wanted to be in the WWE. In any case, after that, we won't see him on the screens of the American Federation again. One thing to know about Sin Cara is the magnitude of his signing a few years before that terrible ending, how big of an event it was. It wasn't just his resemblance to Rey Mysterio, the most famous luchador that many young fans adored. He had the incredible privilege of having a press conference set up for his signing in the world's biggest sports entertainment company.
Cara is now a part of WWE.
It is a very rare event which gave it even more importance, the wrestling equivalent of a Cristiano Ronaldo, who was presented to the fans when he signed at Real Madrid in soccer. Beyond that, his arrival in the WWE caused a lot of reactions in the wrestling world. He was not just anyone. He was already a star in Mexico, where he called himself Mystico. Lucha Libre fans saw him as one of the best wrestlers in the world with an amazing talent. If we put ourselves in the shoes of those who had never heard of him, there were reasons to be enthusiastic with such a reputation. The WWE did a lot of things to favor Sin Cara's chances of triumphing. But as soon as he signed, there were problems. We learned that the Mexican didn't want to go to Florida Championship Wrestling, the company's training center at that time, where the superstars of tomorrow were being prepared. They wanted him to go there to learn wrestling again, in a way, at least the style of the American Federation, which is more mainstream and less acrobatic than Lucha Libre, where he came from. The message that this sent was not really good. Sin Cara considered that he had nothing to learn from the Federation. He already sees himself as a star who understood everything. He already thinks he has everything he needs to connect with the millions of viewers who will watch him. That's not all. He also refused to learn English. That means that he will not be able to speak well with his colleagues in the ring, which will increase the chances of injuries, mistakes, misunderstandings of all kinds. There would also be no moments when he would speak on the microphone in English, which are nevertheless essential for us to care for a character. So we can see that from the very beginning, it was destined to end badly. Fortunately for him, the officials were understanding. They will think he may be right. They were eager to get him started anyway, given the expectations they had created around him. Sin Cara was immediately sent to the main roster on television because he was supposed to be ready. At least that's what he seems to believe. It's April 4th, 2011, on Monday Night Raw, one of WWE's weekly shows. On that day, the United States champion Sheamus faced Daniel Bryan, a fan favorite who came from the Indies. It was on that day that Sin Cara made his debut. After his victory, the Irishman attacks Daniel, despite the referee who tries to prevent him from doing so. But then,
There he is.
we immediately notice music with drums, blue lighting, and this pretty light blue and golden outfit of the luchador, with his mask of course. Finally, the time had come for him to appear on television. The long-awaited man since his signing has arrived. He runs towards the ring and then graces us with a spectacular entrance during which he jumps over the ropes. Not perfectly, however, which many internet users will criticize. It's quite symbolic. For his very first entrance into the company, this moment that was supposed to blow our minds, Sin Cara botches his jump. For the record, the secret behind these impressive jumps during his entrance is simply a trampoline. We suspected that with such a high jump, Sin Cara needed a little help, unless he was the world record holder in this field. A technician was hidden under the ring to then hide the trampoline underneath. You may not have known how important the Sin Cara project was for the WWE in 2011. First of all, we must realize the company needed to build new stars with the recent departures of Shawn Michaels, Edge, Batista, and others. From a financial perspective, it was also a success at the beginning of his adventure since we saw children with his mask in the crowd. This object sold very well, which could only please Vince McMahon, but especially Triple H. Indeed, the game had an increasingly important role behind the scenes of the Federation at that time. He launched that strategy of recruiting big names from the Indies, which he will do a lot in the following years with NXT. If the Mexican was so important in 2011, and if his failure is even more shocking, it is because he represented the first big Triple H signing. Sin Cara somehow personified the new position of the cerebral assassin. He was his mascot. We can say that Triple H thought he had the idea of the century and a new big star who could be the company's face for several years. In this case, he played the game and lost. What defined Sin Cara's journey in the WWE, unfortunately, is the multiple errors we have seen in the ring with him. With Chavo Guerrero, for example, there were many botches, as they are called, those moments when wrestlers miss moves. Just take the example of their match at the Over the Limit show, which was his first appearance on pay-per-view. On that day, it was the finisher that was poorly executed. To this, we can also add several failed entrances where he hit the rope while he was supposed to go over it. Often there were embarrassing moments in the ring when things didn't flow smoothly. We felt misunderstandings with his colleagues. To top it all off, while his mistakes were being noticed more and more, the Mexican is still undefeated when he faces Christian in July 2011. That day symbolized a turning point in his journey. For the first time, he loses. It often happened that wrestlers stayed interesting because they had an unbeaten streak. Now, he no longer had that advantage either. Barely 3 months after his debut, we could already guess the Federation believed a little less in him to make him lose for the first time randomly, in the middle of one of its weekly shows. In 2011, Sin Cara had nevertheless the chance to participate in the Money in the Bank match. This means that he was offered the chance to maybe win the briefcase that would give him an opportunity at any title for a year. But what happened that day is memorable, and not necessarily for the reason we would have imagined. That night, he will be the victim of a big attack by Sheamus, who will smash him on a ladder. In the aftermath, Sin Cara will be evacuated on a stretcher. To say the least, it was a memorable scene, which we still remember today. In reality, it was a WWE strategy. Although we were led to believe this attack had injured him, and that he needed several weeks to heal, the truth is he has been suspended. The reason Sin Cara was suspended is very simple. The luchador tested positive for a banned substance. Even though he will defend himself by saying it was because of an injection from a doctor, he will have no choice but to stay on the sidelines for several weeks. Of course, it was a disaster for him to be suspended at that moment, when he had only been there for a few months and his rise was already starting to go bad. Clearly, the gap between the expectations of a few months ago and what we have really seen so far is widening more and more. One of the most interesting things about the Mexican's journey in the company concerns the story of the fake Sin Cara. Let's do a quick recap. At the end of the summer of 2011, we see Sin Cara again on SmackDown to face Daniel Bryan. Right after winning the match, he offered Bryan to shake hands in a moment of fair play. While Daniel accepted, Sin Cara attacks him with a big kick. So we seem to be heading for a new villain character for Sin Cara. The fact is that a few weeks later they will have another confrontation with Daniel Bryan. It is again a rather entertaining match from a technical standpoint. It will nevertheless end with a disqualification of Sin Cara, who started kicking on him after blocking him in a corner. But there was a shocking moment. Another Sin Cara will arrive who was actually the real one, a kind one. In a scene reminiscent of Spider-Man, we have two Sin Caras facing each other. In fact, it had been several weeks since another performer embodied this character, but the deception exploded into the open. An amusing detail about this period is the legend Booker T, who claimed to have found the difference between the real and the fake Sin Cara. He said he noticed a small black mark on the boots that one had and the other didn't. Subsequently, after the real Sin Cara defeats Heath Slater, the fake will appear on the arena screen. We see him taking off his light blue mask to reveal the same one in black, as if to symbolize the fact he is his dark side in a certain way. Personally, I would have preferred the mystery to be maintained for longer, that we could not distinguish one from the other for a much longer period. However, the most attentive ones will have noticed that the fake Sin Cara was bigger than the real one. Although they were about the same size, there was about 30 pounds of difference between the two men. There was another meaning behind this whole story. In Mexico, the two wrestlers already had the same name. There was a real history between them. But unfortunately, many fans had no idea. Anyway, the two Sin Caras will have a rivalry, in which the original will triumph over the imposter by removing his mask in October. It will lead to an extraordinary comment by Booker T him again.
I see why I wore that mask now also. The guy is ugly.
There is, however, a small subtlety that you may not have known. After 2013, the Sin Cara character still existed in the Stamford Federation, despite the departure of the wrestler. The explanation is quite funny. After the original Sin Cara was fired, the one who originally played his evil double took over his role. He will remain in the main roster for several years, with more success than his colleague. One thing you may not have known about Sin Cara is that he has already been talked about for completely unlikely reasons. Indeed, this is a story about merchandising, and it may have caused more reactions on the web than his entire period in the WWE. For your information, in the fall of 2011, a new t-shirt with his image was going to be put on sale by the company, and not just any one. We're not going to fall into vulgarity, obviously, but this image amused the internet users a lot, who couldn't help but see a penis in it. It's still amazing. Not only were there botches in the ring, but even in the merch, there were complications for Sin Cara. In this case, it is the fault of the creators of the t-shirt, who may have lacked vigilance in this story. Fortunately for him, the Mexican could console himself by telling himself he was on one of the 3 covers of the WWE 12 video game, which is not nothing. It shows how he was considered one of the faces of the company before completely sinking. When the luchador finished his storyline with the fake Sin Cara, we can say it was the end for him, with a useless period which will therefore not end well. He will seriously injure his knee in November 2011, which will keep him out for several months. Of course, this is something that happens to all wrestlers, nothing very shocking. However, in his journey, the timing of this injury was very bad. While his career was starting to turn in circles, and he would have needed a big push, there was a nice project for him at that time. Indeed, we were not very far from WrestleMania 28, and the Federation wanted to set up a dream match against Rey Mysterio there. The most famous luchador in the world against the new luchador who embodies the future, while already being a legend in Mexico. A rather crazy detail is that the American Federation had a very specific project around this potential match of masked wrestlers. It wanted to give masks of both men to all the fans in the stadium of the show in order to beat the world record for the number of masks worn at the same place, at the same time. This ambition clearly shows this is a match that was taken very seriously by the company, which wanted to give it significant visibility. In the end, when he returns to the ring, this time wearing red, he will form a team with Rey precisely. But unfortunately, between the injuries and the planned changes, they will never manage to do this match, which will finally not take place at the Showcase of the Immortals. This will undoubtedly remain the biggest question mark of his journey in the WWE. We will never know if a memorable match and a victory against Mysterio could have saved Sin Cara and prevented him from leaving in anonymity shortly after. And that was it for these craziest stories about Sin Cara in the WWE. Seeing his entire career and the many problems he had there, we can think that we have rarely known a wrestler who raised so many expectations but who disappointed so much. Of course, this is a shared responsibility between Sin Cara and the company. We can only regret that things didn't go as planned, because in 2011, the Federation would clearly have needed a new big star. This makes me offer you a debate for you. For you, could the luchador have become a very big name in the WWE in 2011, in the same way as a John Cena or a CM Punk? We invite you to come and give your opinion. It will be interesting to talk about it together in the comments and to share our points of view. We can say that Sin Cara's journey really was special. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay on the Paradise of Wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?